Hi, everybody. Welcome to UX Untamed. I'm Juliet, and I'm super excited because this is our season finale for 2022. I cannot believe it that it's been already a year of 2022 for the podcast. And for today, I wanted to close with like an important topic for me, and it's something really impactful for everybody. So we're going to talking about the power, the diversity, equity, and inclusion. And before I say anything, let's bring our guests. Hey, Erryca, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Super excited. I know, and like how we'll be telling people, all my guests, we talk about this podcast long time ago, and it's like, oh yes, far away in the future, and here we are today, closing up with this episode. So exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's a bunch of my favorite things to talk about all in one place. So I'm excited.
Boom, boom. I'm so excited. Perfect. So, why don't we start telling people who you are? Who is Erryca?
Great. So I am Erryca Robicheaux. My pronouns are she, her, and I live in San Antonio, Texas, with my girlfriend and our dog Zakem and our cat Luna. Professionally, I work for a SaaS company called Mathison, and there our mission is to help companies to create workforces that equally represent society. So what that looks like for us is an end-to-end DEI platform that focuses on diversity and inclusion efforts really throughout the entire employee life cycle. So from attracting and sourcing to equitable hiring, onboarding, all the way through pay equity, advancement, things like that. So what we do is we give them the tools to assess their current efforts. We help them identify their strengths and weaknesses. From there, we suggest goals where they can use that to create a customized, roadmap for their DEI strategy. And then finally, we give them all the tools and trainings that they need to really achieve those goals. And we also give them like really pretty dashboards for transparency and reporting and all of that as well. Can't talk about UX without talking about data visualization.
I like that. I mean, and it's so funny because when you just mentioned this at the end, and this is not like even the topic about this, but I feel like a lot of stakeholders or like that. Yes, like, oh no, I love all the good stuff, but show me how it looks like. Show me that it's
Right.
there. Yes. So thank you for finishing up with that. And I love the dog and the cat. Are they good friends between each other?
They are not. The cat is very, very old, and sadly, she has cancer, so she just wants to chill and like sit in her box. And our dog is like 2.5, and he just wants to play all the time. So he like hasn't learned his lesson in 2.5 years that she still doesn't want to play with him.
That's so cute. I mean, I know I told you this already when we met today, but I love the background that it feels holidays. I wanted
Thank
to
you.
do something like that for mine. It's like I don't think that I have time to just make it happen. Anyway, thank you for that. What about? And I love this one mostly because people always bring something so interesting about themselves that I didn't know. But what is something fun or unique about yourself?
Hmm. So I grew up in South Louisiana, and the first thing that people always think of when I say that is that it was that show on True Blood, the swamp or like swamp people, right? And so everyone's like, "Oh, you grew up in a swamp," and I'm always super quick to point out that like Louisiana is an entire state, and there's all kinds of people who don't live in a swamp. But the actual answer is yes, I grew up next to a swamp.
I mean, I think it's all about the movies. I think they always come with these movies and they'll tell us that it's small towns, but in reality they are not. That's
Right.
so cool. Okay, let's start talking for what we came for. Um, I was looking at your LinkedIn, and I know that we talk about your history, and you did not start as a UX designer.
I
So,
did not.
so what did you do before UX design?
Yeah, I actually didn't even know UX was a thing until much later in my lifetime. So, um, my early career, and I will say, I I definitely would call myself much more like a UX strategist or a UX researcher than designer. But in my early career, I was doing a lot of business operations consulting type of things. So a lot of building new teams for new projects or new store openings and things like that. And then immediately prior into to moving into UX, I had really gotten into the world of XR and VR. So I was doing a lot of 360 and VR content creation, mostly for like marketing purposes for companies.
That's super interesting. That's super cool. So is this how you ended up in UX? Like where is the intersection?
Yeah, it is kind of how I ended up in UX. So one of my favorite quotes is "Good design is good business," and so to me, it was just sort of a natural extension. Um, I I see UX as an extension of good business, and I also see it as a really valuable tool to be able to not only create good business practices, but really to just evaluate complex problems all around. So that could be any kind of complex problem, whether it is business or whether it relates to product or to efficiency or you know whatever that is.
Okay, so I a little get a little bit why did you end up in design and your love for business, and then you told me diversity, equality, and inclusion is like how is it the intersection of all of this? Like when did you say, oh, I think I like this and I'm going to go for it?
Yeah, so my journey to get to where I am today was sort of long and like multi-stepped. Um, Personally, I've just always really cared about inclusion and justice. Even when I was a kid, I grew up in the South, so I like to say there's a lot of isms there. You can fill in all of those blanks. And then in undergrad, I started doing research in industrial organizational psychology, which is basically just the science of human behavior in the workplace. And we know that that has a lot to do with DEI. So now we're talking about like psychological safety and the importance of feelings of belonging and all these things. And so unknowingly, I was looking at all of that in research in like 2002, 2003. So just because it was something that I personally cared about it really was something that I always had in mind throughout my career. But I really did start focusing on it more like officially and professionally when I got into UX. Because the reality is, if you design inclusive user experiences for all users, then that can actually really start to affect social change through sort of a ripple effect. And most people don't realize that, but really good design and inclusive design can be such a powerful tool for social change.
And I feel like with a lot of designers that I talk, they're switching careers or they're looking for some impact, like create impact with their work. That's why they move into UX design because they know that they can be the change that they've been looking for. And maybe
Yeah.
not going into the traditional careers that it could be like, I don't know, being a teacher or like a counselor, I don't know. But I feel like this is such a great space to be creative in a different way and create impact. But I
Yeah.
think before now that we know a little bit of the three kind of spaces that you were like business, design, and DIY, DEI. Oh my, this is always so hard because in Spanish, E and I are kind of similar. Anyway,
Yeah.
always get so confused. But now that we have these three buckets, what it was something that interests you when you were changing between careers?
um, yeah, I think the answer to that is just at heart, I have always been just a researcher and a problem solver.
Mm.
So I mentioned I've been doing academic research all the way through undergrad, and I actually still do academic research with a very cool research team, even though I'm years out of grad school and academia. Um, so for me, I think it was just I really like new spaces and like emerging technology and figuring them out. And there's so many questions like who uses it, who should use it in the future, what can it be used for? Like what problems can you solve with it, right? How can you use it to create social change? And how do you design for that? And how do you design for a space that literally hasn't ever existed before? So all of these are, I don't know, maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment, but all of these I think are just super interesting. And in my mind, UX was really the best way to sort of answer all of these questions and to help solve some of these problems and challenges within emerging markets and new tech and all of that.
And I love this. I know that I mess up a little bit with the questions, but I feel like this question kind of bring us to what is our next one? That is that intersection, because I feel like looking a little bit inside of you as what you like, all of these buckets, then is maybe why did you ended up doing all of this and how they intersect between each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and I love that. And I think because I don't know, when we are kids, I think, and they say, what do you want to do when you are big or what your career, whatever, yes? And then you always look to your heart and it's like, oh, I'm so passionate about this and I want to do it, yes? And I think you mentioning how passionate and how involved and all of these little things are for you, I think that's why you bring so much passion into the business and the company and the organization. So my question is, what now that we are in a company, what is the intersection between business design and DEI?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So to me, I think there's sort of like two ways that you can go with this. Number one, you can just create something that's specifically designed to address an inequality. So you can create a nonprofit, you can create an app, you can create a tool like Mathison, right? Like something that is designed for social change. But the second one, I think, actually can have a much larger impact because it just is the majority of the world. Most product services companies, they don't exist specifically to address like social inequalities, right? Like most companies do something else, but you can still affect change. So an example I was thinking of would be, say, a grocery store and a food desert, right? So a food desert is a geographic region where it's hard for people to have access to fresh foods. So what ends up happening is they eat a lot of processed foods and refined sugars, and you can imagine that has an effect on their health, which can then snowball into all kinds of things like their job, childcare, parent aging parent care, income, just everything, right? Like a whole bunch of things can be affected by addressing this challenge of a food desert. So let's say you're this grocery store and you're like, I'm going to start an app so people can order groceries online and we're going to deliver within, say, a 5-mile radius of our store. And you have a food desert somewhere within this 5-mile radius. But a lot of times, what companies will do is they look at their existing user population. So let's pretend that the average income for their shoppers starts at, say, $70,000 per household income, right? And maybe the average income for people in this food desert is 40,000. So they're not even thinking about this problem or challenge, right? Because they're just thinking about their existing shoppers. When in reality, you have this whole group of people who this app really could benefit from a social perspective, but also from a business perspective. Like, who doesn't want more business and more customers? So not only is it the right thing to do, but it's also good business And then you're just expanding, your user base and your customer base, which is just a win all around. So I think really just starting to focus on more inclusive design, just at a very simple high level, can start to address some of these challenges.
Something that I like is one of with the phrases that you started. Yes, it's like, oh, you have these two different options. Like you have the option is like, oh, let's create a nonprofit and really a specific target. Yes, I feel like that's what we all thinking about. Like, oh, I want to do the change. Let's create a nonprofit and see how it goes. But then we
Right.
forget the impact that we can have in companies that are not like a nonprofit, that can
Absolutely.
really focusing like, okay, what about if we look at these people, they're our customers too. So it's like sometimes our vision is so close that we don't see all of this beautiful stuff around, because it's like, no, I think our customer is just this person and we don't care about anyone else. But in reality,
Right.
there's so many people that can be empowered by a decision that you're taking. So I love that. It's like everybody can make impact in their job
Right.
and what they're doing. Um, how do we measure this? Because okay, yes, I like, okay, I'm doing the change and I'm being the impact, but at the end of the day, the companies and organization is like, show me that it's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. At a high level, I think like going back to the grocery store example, right? If you increase your shopper base and more people are using your tool, if you're bringing in more money, I mean, those are obvious, like tangible things. Um, it might be hard to really pinpoint, like, yes, our shopper base increased greatly, expanded greatly because we included this new group. Like that might be hard to pinpoint, but at a high level, like you can definitely see numbers and trends. If they're going up, then like whatever you're doing is is working, right? um at a less numerically based level, so it's more just something like an internal test that I like to use is asking, is this usable versus is it useful to various populations, right? So I'm just going to stick with our grocery delivery app, right? Um, Maybe you've designed this beautiful app that's very easy to use, um, but for some reason, even though everyone can use it, um, this population that's being all this underserved community might still not be using your app. Why? It is usable for them, but is it useful to them? So, an example of what might make it not usable is maybe there's like a $50 minimum order, and historically this population wouldn't reach that. So maybe you can do sort of like a grocery list that says, add 10 more dollars to get your delivery. It's in the same way that like Amazon or any of those kind of apps sort of have that like measuring system. Um, so that could be a way to address the challenge for that specific group. Or like another one might be maybe you don't accept snap cards via your app. Well, this population that relies on these cards, they're not going to be able to use your app. Or maybe you have the ability, but it's not clear and people don't know that you can use it, right? So while this app is usable for them, it's not useful for them. So if you sort of start to think of it like this for various populations outside of who your who you think your target user is, why aren't these other populations using my product, good, service, app, whatever it is, right? And you can really just start to use this like usable versus useful test to say like, this population isn't using it and it is useful to them, so maybe it's not used, or it is usable to them but it's not useful, so why? And then you can start to sort of dig into those challenges. And as you start to adjust these challenges, the beauty of it is that it's not like the existing users have any less or any more of a hard time using the app, right? Like it's not less satisfying for them to use the app. You're just making it accessible and useful to other users as well.
I love that, the power of like sharing a little bit. Yes, it's like, it's not that I'm taking away from you in reality. I'm just giving more to everybody. And if you are giving more to everybody, even to the person that you thought that it was not in that math, is getting positively affected by this too. So it's a
Right.
win-win to everybody. Um, so what is this important? And why companies should have a real and clear approach to the DEI. And I feel like, because it's a word that is being so popular lately, and everybody's like,
Right.
oh, we should do it. But why? Like, why everybody should be like clear about this approach?
Yeah. So at a super high level, it's a good business decision and it's the right thing to do. And I think a lot of people sort of understand that. That's why DEI is a huge buzzword. Um, a, a, uh, a set of statistics that I really love just because I think it's funny in a not haha kind of way is that something like 93 or 92% of CEOs say that DEI is like a huge priority in their company. And then like 93% of companies don't have like a robust end-to-end DEI strategy. So the the reality is that if it's not intentional, you're just not going to do it, right? Like there are so many things that demand your resources, whether it's time or money or people or whatever, that if you don't prioritize it and you don't have a plan for it, it's just not going to happen. And what that can look like in UX is, probably a lot of us have designed research studies where, we have a limited budget, we have a limited window to get this study done. And so maybe, we would love to have 25 participants, but we can only do like 12 to 15. Like, that's sort of our limitations. So we try to sort of do like a spray kind of approach where we're like, okay, we're going to try to have like a we're going to spread it out across like a group of demographics, right? So maybe if it comes to income, we're going to say we're going to just try to spread it out across like a whole variety of incomes. But what we can do intentionally as UXers who are designing the study is say, okay, well, traditionally our product has been created for these groups that we've been designing for forever, right? So maybe in this study, we really prioritize like intentionally including some of these groups that we haven't been designing for to see what we can learn from them. So yes, maybe you're not getting like a more diverse population in your research, but maybe you don't need it because your whatever it is that you're designing has already been designed for a lot of your users. So how can you help design it for people who aren't currently your users or who you've historically like left out of the research and design and like R&D process throughout the whole life cycle?
Yeah, and again, and the thing is for us to just keep opening our window where we've been looking for a long time, and it's like, okay, I haven't been in this side. What is people saying? What is people needing? And I feel like that sometimes is so uncomfortable because it's like, oh, I have never done that. Yes, I have never talked to these people. And I feel like for us, just thinking an example at work, and I mean, we are in immigration, so for us we do not touch point in so many people, like people who doesn't know the language, people who doesn't know the culture. So for us, our target is like everybody outside of Canada. Yes, it's like so many people that are interested to come. So, and I feel like these last 2 weeks we've been doing some usability testing, and it's been so interesting because it's like, okay, we used to do just people that we knew that they would like to be tested, that they are like, yes, I would like to go and test the tool. But people who doesn't test the tool is the one that we need, because
Right.
they are the ones that don't know how to use it, and it will be more specific to what at the end of the day we are doing. Because we have this person, he's like, I know all of these questions, and we finished like in 10 minutes, and we were thinking, this is a power user. We don't need a power user. We need someone that really is struggling with everybody, with everything that we're saying.
Right.
Is legal content, yes, and it's so hard to understand. And then we have people outside of Canada, they were testing the tool. Is like, I don't know, what is this? How do I get the answer? They were Googling. They were like, oh, I think I will ask my friends and family how to answer this question. And like, oh, yes,
Right.
this feels uncomfortable because it's like, I designed this, yes, and now it's like the people who is using it don't understand what I did. And
Yeah.
that
And
broke my heart. Yes.
yeah, I mean, it does, right? It's hard not to like take it personally, but I mean, I think that the same happens a lot with subject matter experts. So whether the designer is the subject matter expert that they're designing for, or whether you have those internally, whether it's your power users or somebody on your staff or whatever. And the same thing, right? You say like, these are the people who are using my product, so I'm going to keep designing for them. But all you do is design in a spiral to where your user group is much more and more and more defined. And honestly, again, for just the right thing to do and for a good business case is to do exactly the opposite, which is expand your user base.
Okay, yeah, like I get it. Like, we need to design for this and let's do it. But what happened in many occasions is like you were saying, 90% of CEOs is like, yes, we love it, let's do it. And then we are so far from that top of power. It's like, yeah, I wanted to do it, but the right culture is not there, and no one really is approaching the EI as I am. No one is as passionate as me. How do I
Yeah.
create the right cultures to foster the oh my goodness, I shouldn't say
Oh
that.
man, that's such a big
In
question.
Spanish.
No worries. My girlfriend is from Venezuela, so this is like a comfortable conversation because I the same thing happens to her, so no worries. Okay, so a culture that fosters DEI. So that is such a big question. Um, I'm going to answer it in two different ways. First, I'm going to answer it from sort of a company perspective, and then I'll answer it from an individual perspective. So, from a company perspective, you have to not only get buy-in from the top, but they have to be actively involved in creating this culture, right? You can have everybody from mid-level below like super bought in, but if your leadership isn't bought in, it's not going to happen, right? You're not going to get the changes, the policy changes, the systematic changes, the tools, the resources, the money, whatever, to make this happen. So buy-in from the top. But then you have to have an actual plan. And that can look like a bunch of things. Maybe, you know, maybe that looks like a consultant. Maybe that looks like just starting with best practices because you're not quite ready for a more robust practice. The great news is that now DEI tech is an emerging industry, right? And there are platforms like Mathison that exist to where if you say, I don't know where to start, like we don't even like we're completely at a loss, that's fine, right? Our tool is built for you, and there are lots of other tools on the markets that are useful and great. And I say, like, I want all of these tools to be successful, right? Because we're all trying to do the same thing, which is help companies to actually create that strategy. And I think that the challenge that a lot of companies have is they do sort of rely on best practices, but a best practice for one company might not at all be a best practice for another company. So it really has to be a tailored plan that works for your company. So ERGs are great. Having equitable practices all the way throughout, from equitable hiring practices, the way your company brands and markets itself, is that equitable? Are your job postings equitable? Do you have equitable interview practices? I mean, there's just so much. Do you have a system of pay equity? Do you have, is it? Does everybody have an equal opportunity to advance? Like, there's tons and tons and tons and tons of things. And the reality is, no company can do all of these things at once. Like, start from zero and like be at 100, right? But you got to know where you're starting. You got to know where your gaps are, and then you have to just create a plan to fix those gaps. You can use, ROI to see where the best use of your resources are, to start. I mean, it's the same exact way that we approach literally any business problem. But for whatever reason, historically, DEI has not been approached in this way, but it has to be in order to solve this business problem. So that's my answer from a company perspective. From a personal perspective, um, you know, I mentioned employee resource groups, and those are really great. A great way to start organizing. If your company isn't ready to support an ERG, maybe you just sort of get a group of your colleagues together that have similar lived experiences that you do, and you just start there. Um, and just creating that space around you for others, um, can have a ripple effect. So if you are creating that space, if you are practicing, inclusive practices, then that's going to probably catch on and sort of expand around you, which admittedly I know can be discouraging when you're in like a larger organization and you really want to like see the change happen more quickly. But any change is good change, right? Any good step in the right direction is a step.
This made me think about, I don't know, training. And I feel like that's usually my examples because I train. But, it's not that I go to the gym and the first day that I go to the gym is like, I'm super strong and I'm like going to competitions. It doesn't happen like this. And I think maybe we are thinking because we're in a company and they have the money and the resources, then if we start this DEI process, then we have to go 100% at the beginning.
Right.
But as a body, your body doesn't get used to the movement right away. Yes, you need to go little by little. And I feel, I don't know if people, do you think that people is really scared about what they could find? And I feel like that's what could happen. Is like, oh my goodness, I realized that I haven't moved in this long and my legs, I'm not as strong as I used to be. Or I've been hiding all these things behind and now I'm exposing it to everybody. Is this a little bit
Right.
of the factor why this is not included?
I absolutely think so. And I love that example because I actually used to be a personal trainer. Um, so so I think it's great. Um, yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are scary, when you start to approach this topic. Number one, it's hard and uncomfortable, right? If you are talking about people's personal lived experiences and how that is reflected in a workspace, if you're talking about historical systems that you didn't realize are completely inequitable, like that is hard, right? It takes a measure of self-reflection and the ability to just really like own it and say, okay, we haven't been doing a good job. And nobody wants to feel like that, right? It's hard. And it's not just hard at first. it keeps being hard, right? If you're in the gym and you're trying to gain your strength, you're going to keep maxing out, right? You're only going to grow if it stays hard. And the same thing is true in this space. You have to be willing to continually have these sort of hard conversations and like take a look at these hard perspectives that you don't really want to. But the trade-off is that instead of staying weak and not fit and not healthy and not feeling good about yourself, you feel strong and you feel healthy. Like if you do the work to get there, then it's so worth it. It's just really scary to start. And some people just don't even know where to start, right? And I love when you said the trainer, because if I don't know where to start and I have no knowledge and I walk into a gym, I'm not going to be successful, right? Or maybe I will Google something and I'll find some YouTube videos. So maybe that'll be kind of helpful to me. But without a personal assessment and like a personal roadmap to my own, health journey, I'm not. Maybe I'll get there eventually, but maybe it'll take me 2 years instead of 6 months, right? So like if I'm making the investment to go to the gym and put in the work, and like why wouldn't I want to get that benefit faster?
And you know what I love about, again, I'm going to talk about the gym, but when you get strong and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm doing so great, and you go maybe to holiday, so you are going to a different space outside of the gym, and then maybe you're getting sick, but because you've been training, you've been eating properly, now whatever comes around, you're feeling more stronger to take it. And I think that will happen the same in a company that is going to start prioritizing DNI, because they will understand that, okay, we have already looked at that. So right. Whatever problems are happening, we know that we have a team that is going to work hard, a team that is going to back it up, because we do the work too.
And that's exactly right. And the idea is not to just check boxes. The idea is to create a culture that fosters diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice, all of these things. And if your company has a culture that fosters all of those things, then not only as a company, but the individuals within the company, you're right, will be able to address these things as they come up, because new social challenges do come up all the time, and they do affect the workplace and the way that people bring themselves into the workplace. So having that culture that can really just address those in an effective way, like that's ultimately, that's where you're trying to get.
I feel like what happens sometimes, and I do mentorships, and there are people, they are going to their first job, or let's do that example, but it's like, this is what has been happening at work, and it doesn't feel right. Yes, it's like there is something fishy, but I don't know what it is. And maybe because we've been in a culture where not treating people right or hiding things is the norm,
right?
Then we don't know what is right or what is wrong. Yes. So how do we know the red flags for a company around DIY? Because that's a hard one.
Man.
Yes. Or maybe it's an easy one, but we are so used to living around those red flags.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely correct. I think there are so many could be red flags. I think maybe I'll sort of take this question from the other way, and maybe how do you know that a company is inclusive? Like, what should companies be doing to create a safe and inclusive space that fosters belonging and whatnot? And again, there are a ton of them, but all the way from the beginning, I mentioned is their culture of DEI part of their brand? Like, do people even know that as they're attracting Are they using inclusive language? That's huge, right? If you go into an interview, does your interviewer ask your pronouns or use their pronouns? I'm Erryca, my pronouns, or she, her. What are your pronouns? That would be a sign of an inclusive culture. Um, if they don't have crazy job requirements for a job, right? If they're asking for like a master's degree to like, fold clothes on a retail store floor, like that's, not um, necessary. And so that really is going to exclude a lot of people who could apply for that job otherwise. Um, do they offer accommodations both during your interview and just every day for your life? Do you need accommodations? Do they make it easy to request them, and do they actually follow up on that? I mean, there's just a million things that companies can do, very small things and easy to implement things that tell people that they are in a safe space. And so I think by the time you get to red flags, like you're way too far gone. Like, don't focus on the red flags. Like, focus on these little things that help to make people feel included. And if a company is doing those things, then like that's somewhere you probably want to be.
Um, yes, I feel like, yeah, when you are so so into red flag is being late for that interviewing process, and I think that's one of the most important when you are interviewing and talking to companies is ask all these questions and making sure that uh, they're answering it in a way that is inclusive and for everybody.
Right.
But okay, now we've been talking a little bit from the top, yeah, from the big, from the macro. So now I want to come back to as an individual, like
Okay.
what can I do, not just in my company, but outside, like in my day to day, to impact everybody.
Yeah, great question. Your all of your questions are great. I feel like I've said that like 18 times. But I think there's a few high level things that you can do. Again, like I like to shy away from like best practices. So yes, a best practice might be when you're meeting someone to include your pronouns so that they feel safe including their pronouns. But at a much higher level, I think it just boils down to awareness and willingness to have hard conversations and to be uncomfortable sometimes. Respecting that like everyone has unique lived experiences, and sometimes those might not match yours. Um, and just because they don't, like, doesn't make their experiences any less valid than yours. And I think that for me, that's the hardest part of having these conversations, is when I am talking to somebody who I disagree with or who I don't understand where they're coming from, but still respecting that they still have, their own lived experiences. But also just educating yourself through, awareness and reading and things like that, and also through these conversations. So yeah, awareness, education, and willingness to just be super uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah, that's a hard one. But again, we went to the macro and then we come to us as individuals. But then when we start learning and being more aware, this is going to start impacting everybody around us. And that's what I
Right.
love about this. That yes, I would like to change the world, but maybe I could start with me and with what I know. And that will start trickling into more people. It's like, oh, where did you learn that? Did you learn that? Oh, I didn't know about that. And I
Absolutely.
feel like this for me the most impactful when you start reading and surround yourself with people like, for example, like you, and it's like, oh, I didn't know this, and I haven't
Right.
done it, and that feels bad, but I think it feels like, wow, I know that I'm conscious about that, I have done it,
Right.
and I can change it.
And to that point, I I think that part of, one of the hardest parts about all of this is what we perceive as negative feedback. But I really try to think of it as the opposite, right? If someone is telling you something about something that you've done, that means that they think highly enough of you and they respect you enough to give you this feedback because they know that you want to be better and you can be better. They're not going to give you that feedback if they don't think that. So starting to reframe the way that we receive that feedback as really sort of a compliment, right? If you think of it that way, rather than like a negative thing.
And I feel like that comes since when we were kids. Yes, I don't know. Thinking is like, oh, you shouldn't do that. That's bad. And I think we are so afraid about that confrontation and how we get uh, feedback. Mostly
Right.
because I feel like, I hope that my mom's not looking at this, but getting out the feedback when you were a kid is everything was bad and you were not doing
Yeah.
okay. But at the same time, they never said to you, okay, yes, you shouldn't do this, but what about if we tried this? What about, have you think about a different way? Or what do you think? Is this something that you think that is happening? I feel like it was always like bad, bad, bad. You go
Yeah.
and solution it by yourself. But I feel like now what you're mentioning is like, if I'm telling you, hey, you shouldn't call me like this, or you shouldn't, it happens a lot, you shouldn't say this about Colombia, or of course I don't do that because I'm Colombian, whatever it is, then you're like,
Right.
oh, okay, thank you. But it's like, oh, I didn't know that that was what happened and that's what I was doing. Um, and that's true. Is like I do want you to see my truth, and I want you to see where I'm coming from. So that's what I'm telling you, and I wouldn't
Right.
tell it to absolutely everybody because I wouldn't feel safe to do it. So
Right.
when I'm saying it to someone is because I trust you and we have built this relationship where I can be vulnerable with you.
Right. And even when it is presented in a negative way, like when your parents yell at you, ultimately it's because they want what's best for you. Maybe sometimes people don't present it in the right way, but the underlying sentiment is the same, that they want you to be better because they want you to be your best self. And it is, you're right, it is a lot harder when it's presented negatively, but inside yourself, just reframing that, to take the good parts and just sort of try as hard as you can to not be affected by the negative.
And at the end, we're all learning. Yes, I'm learning to give feedback and I'm learning how to do it because at the beginning I will be like, oh, why are you saying this? We are not that. And I'm like, hey, have you? And now I'm more calm. And it's like, I realize that not everybody has the same knowledge and has been through the same path. So I shouldn't just like bombard you with all this information and kind of act in the same way. Maybe it's like, oh, I get it. Yes, I'm Colombian and other people have watched all these TV shows about Colombia and they think that we are all the same. But it's like, oh, for me, it's like, oh, have you ever heard about us Colombians with the coffee or about the flowers or about all these flavors? And it's like, oh, I didn't know that. It's like, yeah, this is what really Colombia is. Yeah. So I
Yeah,
feel like it's the same how I'm learning to give you feedback. Mhm.
absolutely. And it's always a journey. Like this space, it really is a never-ending journey forever, because you're never going to know everything. You're never going to talk to every person with every lived experience. Society is going to keep changing. Things are going to keep happening. Like it's not like you can get to a place and be like, yeah, I feel good. Like I'm at a good place now. Forever and ever, it's going to be changing, and you're going to be learning.
Yeah, that made me think about movies, when the movies everybody's so happy and doing perfect and then something bad coming. So it's kind of that experience the same. Yes, if you're in that point where
Exactly.
everything looks so good, something is happening. So maybe you just keep learning. But about learning, where do I find all this information? Where I can get like knowledge about this?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many great newsletters available now, and you can subscribe to newsletters from LinkedIn, from Facebook, from company websites, from mailing. There's like a million places. So I would recommend just finding a couple newsletters that you really like. I probably subscribe to newsletters. I probably have 20 or 30 that I get, and I can't always read all of them. But what I can do is peruse the highlights and see if it's something that's interesting. And then another place that I just love is LinkedIn, specifically for the DEI and the UX communities. There's just such great community there. People posting amazing content, people writing amazing books, people sharing videos, all kinds of great stuff. The newsletters, LinkedIn Lives, the LinkedIn audios. I mean, just there's so much great content in there that I love it. And then specifically for the DEI space, Mathison actually has a DEI community called Gather, and it's for DEI practitioners, and they can share tools and tips and tricks and questions and stuff. So that's great. Oh, and podcasts. I forgot about podcasts. Also love those. We're on one right now. There's tons of great UX podcasts. There are tons of great DEI podcasts. Again, Mathison has a podcast called Voices of Inclusion. So obviously I listen to that one every week, and a number of other ones. But the great news is there is so much available content that you can really find the stuff that you like and really focus on that. And maybe even you like one podcast, but every episode isn't for you. That's also fine. Like over find what you love and then focus on the pieces of it that you relate to.
Yeah, and again, you don't have to go, oh, let's go to university and like a master degree right away. You can start with something as simple as just start reading newsletters. So just go on LinkedIn and start following people that have the same interests, and they will. I mean, you don't even have to do anything. They start posting. It's like, okay, this is so cool and this is so great.
Right. It just pops up for you. You don't even have to look for it.
I know, I love it. But I think what I learned the most about today is being intentional about what we do and where we wanted to go and really start moving. Yes, it's like if I'm staying here, I'm not going to learn anything because
Right.
I'm not doing anything. So just being intentional and start practicing what you wanted to learn.
Right.
Okay, this is the season finale. So that means that the year is almost done. So what is happening for you? What is coming up?
So I'm one of those people who just really believe that the universe has way cooler things for me that are coming than anything that I could like make up or imagine for myself. So I always just really try to be open to that, like whatever you've got for me, like bring it on. But having said that, I mean, I love what I'm doing. I love that Matheson is the intersection of business and emerging tech and emerging industry and all of these different things and UX and product and just sort of everything that I love. So I mean, ideally I would like to just continue to help promote DEI in that way for as long as they'll have me.
I love it because I'm the same. I feel like you never know what could happen, and I think what you've been doing and you've been training, and then you realize, boom, there's something big happening, and you didn't see it coming, but you've been like growing it and putting water on that. So I love it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have never imagined that there was a company that combined all of my passions, and then I found Matheson, and I was like, oh my God, this company exists. This is basically my dream. So if I had said like, oh, I really want to work for one of these 5 companies and never like left myself open to, what was out there that I didn't know about, I would have never gotten here. So.
Well, that's what I was thinking. It's like, okay, next year I'm going to bring Erryca to talk about her journey and finding her job, because I feel like I love that. Yes, like finding that space where you can combine everything that you're passionate about.
Yes.
You think that is not easy, but it just comes to you, and I want people to really understand that. And I feel like if seeing people and meeting people where they're in a space where they feel so fulfilled and joy about what they're doing, it's like everybody should have this. So I will bring you. I'm putting you down.
Yeah.
Next year.
Great. I love it. I mean, my like high level advice on that would be, it doesn't just come to you, right? Like again, with intentionality, you do have to be intentional about what it takes, right? You have to put yourself out there. You have to make connections. You have to meet people and read about things and really educate yourself and put yourself in a position where it can come to you, right? Like I always think of when I was a kid, and this lady told me a story about this woman, and every day she prayed to win the lottery every day of her life, and she got to heaven. She's like, God, I never won the lottery. You know, I prayed to you every day. Why didn't I win? He's like, well, you never bought a ticket. So, you have to, you do have to be intentional about putting yourself out there in order for things to come to you.
Well, I won't ask you any more questions about this, so we can save it for next year. But Erryca, thank you so much for being my closing guest. I love it. And for everybody who is listening to us or watching us, do not forget to subscribe so you don't miss people like Erryca and amazing stories for next year. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited about next year already.
Of course, me too. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.